Welcome to episode 11 of Uncharted Your Sidekick for Life, the podcast where we navigate the twists and turns of life, offering insights and mentorship for Generation Z and beyond. This week, Dan Dillard, Dr. Leon Vanstone, and myself, Natalie Payton, are joined by Jeremy Sweet, a seasoned CPA, business owner, and mentor. In this episode, we discuss the importance of mentorship, the challenges of entrepreneurship, and what to do when you don't have all the answers, especially when the road ahead is anything but clear. Special thanks to our Gen Z contributors this episode who were interviewed by Anais Schmidt, including a revisit from brother-sister duo Rafaela and Luke, who give us their take on college as they're currently navigating and building their business, and Trevor, who shares his inner doubts and asks how he can tell when someone genuinely wants to be his friend or not. So buckle up as we set off on this uncharted journey together.
Welcome to Uncharted, your sidekick for life. This is episode 11. Ooh. Yay.
That's amazing. I can't believe we're at 11. I know.
I was waiting. I'm looking at you. And
I was like, I've already said double digits. What
do I say? 11.
Yeah.
Thought you were a personality.
I know. I really should have leaned into that.
Why don't we just start with that? Let's start with our intros.
Hey, everybody. I'm Natalie Payton. I am an actor, comedian, and podcast personality.
You have to think about that.
I know.
Every single time I'm anticipating. Is she going to say it right?
Natalie.
And I'm Dr. Leon Vanstone, rocket scientist, storyteller, and entrepreneur, and of course, co-founder of Founding Up.
That's just so blasé.
I'm so blasé, darling. I'm a rocket scientist.
I'm a rocket scientist and, Founding Up and just part of this thing. I'm Dan Dillard, media entrepreneur, financial background, and also podcast, not a personality, podcast host of Uncharted, as well as co-founder of Founding Up. And we have a guest mentor on the show. You want to talk about who you are and introduce yourself?
Yeah, Jeremy Sweet. I'm a CPA, father and husband. Got my own CPA firm running for about 6 years now.
It's
kind of crazy it seems like it's gone so fast.
Well, as you have seen some of the shows before, this whole just conversation is about mentorship, because all of us have experienced mentorship in some form or fashion in our life, and our audience is generally geared towards Gen Z. So these students, your kids are how old? You said 5 and 7?
5 and 7, yeah. Yes. 2 little girls.
Is that Gen Z yet?
Alpha, right?
Gen Alpha, I think.
Gen Alpha, right. Gen Z starts at 9 to 27?
8, something like that. I mean, there's no, I will say there's not like, the government hasn't come and prescribed it. It's kind of a thing. But yeah, they're Gen A.
Yeah. So they'll, reason for all of this is just hoping that be able to communicate with Gen Z that we are a generation that understands we're humans and making this effort, as is in Founding Up and in Uncharted, making this effort to let the whole generation know we're here. We understand. I've got a 21-year-old who is Gen Z, and I've seen the pains, but it started at about 13, with her complexities of what she's facing all the way through now to today. And so I've kind of lived that experience alongside her, and kind of my heart goes out on top of that, dealt with in my former career as a financial planner, hundreds of families that were saving for their kids. And so I was in those conversations and witnessing the disconnect between what Gen Z wanted and what their parents were planning for. And so kind of saw that need. And so I thought, why not put podcasts together and have conversations about some of the things that we can do to make the world better for Gen Z and future generations. So that's what we're here all about. Is one of the things that impacted me was mentorship significantly throughout life. And so I wanted to kind of start talking about how that impacts others and bring guest mentors on board and kind of have those conversations. So for you, I know that you've got a background. Why don't we talk about how you started and like when you were going to college, or when you were even before that in high school? What were you thinking about your career-wise? What were your thoughts at that point in time?
Yeah, it was kind of, I was one of those people that didn't really think about it as much. I was kind of floating through high school playing sports, until It's like that was always what I was going to do in college was play baseball. That my senior year kind of realized that wasn't happening, and that's kind of when it hit me, is like I hadn't really planned anything out. And so it's like even with the college, I was like, all right, well, no scholarship, so start applying.
Yeah.
And it was really kind of random how I ended up at Southwest Texas or Texas State now. And so and then it was, going through the classes, and I ended up in accounting because, hey, I do this well. And so it just kind of made sense to keep going down that path. But I never really kept thinking, hey, what does this look like after?
Right.
It was kind of at that point, we're graduating in 2009 with the economic crash. And it's like, well, there's accounting's safe. So that's kind of where I ended up with an industry, was still needing accountants.
Everybody does.
Yeah. And so that's kind of did the first 3 years. The economy started getting better. That company ended up selling to private equity. And so I was kind of working through with them. And so it was really interesting to kind of see, behind the scenes and everything that's going into, these business owners selling their business. But once that was done, I was based in Houston. It was, okay, their accounting department's in Atlanta. It's like, do I want to move? I'm like, I'm not, tied down that much to really want to relocate. So
Right.
had some friends at BDO on the tax department side. I was like, hey, that sounds, still good paying, prestigious company. It's, a good spot to land. And especially if you can work with some friends, even better.
Yeah.
So
like a path. It's like, here's a path. And that's, I love that you shared that story of, I had no clue. And I had an idea of what I wanted to become, which is sports. And then I had this realization that's not going to happen. And I had to pivot. And then this, like, what do I do? Even call it. So I love that because it identifies with a lot of what, like, my daughter's going through and my daughter's gone through. And so, and I say my daughter, and I use her as an example of her friends and Gen Z and a lot of these kids that we've talked to are in the same boat. And it's like, what do you do? Leon shares this story, and he shared it before, but I don't think he's heard about as far as how you decided to go follow, being a rocket scientist, like how that came about. It wasn't like this.
I was just failing upwards, honestly. Like I went to university. I kind of ended up hating it.
But before that, like to even choose that university is what the story I was referring to.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay. So I had gone, in the UK, but basically I'm like 17, and my school had put a careers fair on, as schools do. And I got home, and I anticipated, it was at like 6 p.m. or 7 or something. And I anticipated my father would be a little unhappy to have to drive me. This was the I'm not a taxi service section of my life, And so I said to him, well, they're doing this careers fair, but we don't have to go. It's okay. And he said, no, come on, we should go to that. So I go. Again, like almost didn't go, right? Like my whole life would be entirely different, potentially. And arrive at this hall. And yeah, all the stuff about sports and nursing and everything is humming with all these people. And someone says, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I was sort of thinking about engineering or something. I don't know. They said, oh, there's this guy at the back of the hall, looked really lonely. So I walked over and I said, hi, I think I might want to be an engineer. And he said, well, what do you like? And I said, it's sort of similar. I like planes and rockets. They're cool. He said, oh, you should do aeronautical engineering. I said, okay, which university? He said, this one. I said, okay, and I applied. I was 17. I had no idea, what that even looked like, what that meant, what that would do, what that implied. I was just like, okay, I guess. And I was lucky enough that they accepted me, and I went, and the whole arc of my life, its entire trajectory, is full of those little moments where you're like, I don't know. It wasn't like I said, I want to be, he said, excellent, you'll be a rocket scientist. Take 10 years, off you go. And I had some enormous grand plan. Some guy was like, okay, you like planes, go do aeronautical engineering. I'd never even heard of it. I'd never heard of the university. I had to go look it up.
But it's also what you always talk about is when we're 18 and we're given the task of pick what you want to do with your life, go.
Right.
You had sports on the mind and in the plan, and that didn't work out. And so you were called to pick what you were going to do, go. And you did it, and you're still with it, which is amazing.
One thing I'm curious about, and I think that would be a great thing to answer for people that might be curious about it, Gen Z, is what does a CPA do? And I'm going to ask that in two parts. First, when you worked with a firm and now that you're a business owner, so we'll dive into that second. But first, like when you first applied to this CPA firm, like what did you expect and what did you end up doing?
Yeah, and that's what I kind of just as a CPA, you can do so much, and the accounting field's so broad.
Mhm.
Like there's, just at the basics, you have the accounting, and then at the big public firms, which is where I ended up going, you kind of have the tax and the audit and consulting services. And there's just, man, you could be an auditor your whole life and have no idea about tax. Vice versa. It's like there's stuff that I, can't do. From a tax background with the audit. But really it encompasses a lot of business kind of, and then life and personal, depending on which sector you end up into. But, from all aspects, like
So if
with
you go into business, like business tax returns and things of that nature, or even any other
like
kind of work, like
individual tax returns where you can just focus on, the individuals, and you're kind of diving into their personal life with all of their investments, even down to gambling, and, everything's going to factor in somehow, at the tax level. Their businesses, if they're business owners, or, stock options with their W-2 working with their companies, and just kind of planning around that. You can also be auditing the business financials. And so you're going deep down into the accounting and the treatment for these, public companies that you might end up investing in, and just kind of making sure that the processes and everything's reflected fairly,
got it.
That way. Or down to kind of where my background was at BDO was tax compliance for, larger, mid to large public and private equity clients on the tax side. So at the end, we're doing a lot of, the K-1s and investments for the shareholders of those companies, and getting everything down, towards them.
Was that intimidating? Like as you were like, do you feel like college prepared you and you were like, oh, this, I know this, or once you went through college, you're like, and then started the job, was that like an intimidating part?
It was, because, in class, when I was going through school, everything was so technical. And then you get to the business world and it's okay, was it my technical skills that are carrying me now? Because you start from the bottom, and you kind of work your way up to those large technical skills. It's not necessarily from the textbooks. It's more managing, like I said, it's those personal relationships and finding and being able to talk to and identify with those mentors within the company, those managers that can help you kind of proceed and learn what you need to do in the business environment. Because like I said, it's massive, the accounting field. You can do all, and you can't teach to what you're going to become in school. So a lot of it's the basics. And that's what I think, it's also a lot of the relationships and skills that you learn through social in college that helped me a lot more on the business side. Because once you get into the business, you're going to learn that business and what you need to do kind of going forward.
Right. Okay. So that's
so interesting.
Because that's interesting too, right? Even like the sports didn't work out, right? But still, actually, you would be an entirely different person potentially if you'd just done the CPA. You'd just gone to university for that, and hadn't had that experience with sports, which probably made you far more people forward.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Even playing sports in college with the intramurals and everything too. Yeah.
And then you may still be at, not that would be good or bad, it'd just be different, but you'd still be in a company potentially very technical, perhaps because you wouldn't have had those people skills, but instead, because, it's just funny, I say life is sort of very tolerant of things that feel like they might be failure, but they're not. It's just all part of that experience and that journey. Sports didn't work out. You became a CPA, but now you have your whole company.
Yeah, and part of the company was because of those relationships, like within college and through as you're talking to, clients. But that as you get older and people like your friends from college start doing their own thing, and hey, you were in accounting. I've got some questions about this, and then you start working together, and that kind of builds your confidence to go from a firm and kind of start your own thing. And
That was another
I think,
leap.
a big part.
That was another leap that you had. It was
Yeah.
like, one is going to work for someone, and I always talk about this box that that school and university prepares us for, and it's to be a worker for another individual, and then there's another leap that, all right, I'm going to go and put my own shingle up. Yeah, what was that like for you?
It was a tough decision. At the time, we had just had our first child, and then we're going into, planning for a second. But it was also that point in my career where, hey, you're going to be, on the partner track at your firm. Do you want to kind of silo yourself that if you're going to kind of make a decision, we need to do it now before you kind of wait too long. But really it was my supporting cast. My wife had a solid job that, hey, if I failed,
Right.
there's that safety net, it would be okay. And in my industry, with accounting, hey, I had no worries about, hey, if I take, basically it would just be a 2-year break or whatever. And then had no confidence, like I was fully confident that I could come back and find
Right.
another job and kind of pick up where I left off. So
It is one of those things, if people are worried, and we've had we'll get into the questions in a second, but people thinking about, the economy and what should I do? Two of the careers that have come up that are in high need, nursing and CPAs. There's always a need for a CPA. So that confidence in saying, I can go do my thing, and then if it fails, I've got this.
give it a try. Yeah,
give
at
it a
least.
shot.
I have a question, because it sounds like you took a big risk by going out and doing your own firm. And were you weighing the facts of like becoming a partner that would be financially lucrative, but if I were to have my own firm, the sky's the limit? Like, what?
I think that was the idea. I think it was also, a lot of it was, hey, this is, you're at a massive firm, and you're going through those channels. It's the hours are going to be, you don't have control of your hours. You're going
Right.
to have to do
It's a
that. That's
grind.
just
You
the
put your time in.
grind. Yeah. And that's how it's going to be. And so it was also looking at, okay, as my own, I have a lot more control around that and how I want to build the firm for, employees going forward. Not going to have, my idea won't have, mandatory 60-hour, minimum billables. I have more control. Hey, maybe it's, at my end, it's not as lucrative monetarily, but we can build that environment where not everybody's just like walking around like zombies, because, can have that work-life balance. So that was a big part. Also is, it's scary, but, to have my wife in my corner, to be like, hey, you can do this.
Yeah.
I'm with you all the time. You can do this. You've got this. And so kind of all of those factors. And yeah, the sky's the limit, maybe less so in tax consulting, because, how much can you spread yourself?
Sure.
But that, yeah, it's like, I can do that. Is kind of how I ended up feeling. So,
Okay, thank you for sharing that. And I'm so glad you said work-life balance, because let's not forget that life balance gives you a richness in life. You being able to have time with your family and your wife and kids and have your own firm, you are rich. I consider that rich. I don't
Right.
know how much you make,
Right.
but you're rich with your life because you have that
You're going to get a
balance.
bunch of calls after that.
Yeah.
Guy's rich.
So I heard you're rich.
What's your secret?
I'm just going to get clipped out to that.
No, that is, I love hearing that story, because again, it's showing a path. And that's what we're trying to do, is show the paths that people have taken, and how those are, decisions, and it takes family, and there's there is risk, but you mitigated your risk by, what I'm hearing is, I mitigate my risk because I've got someone on my corner that we could make it on that income. And if it fails, I can go back to work. And so that's a really neat. Now, are you happy with that choice that you've built your own
Oh,
business? And
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, at first it might not have been like, it's not exactly why I'm happy isn't exactly
Right.
kind of what I was thinking at the beginning.
Never
because another part of it is now I'm working with, smaller clients, or, instead of the private equity companies, we're working directly with the CFO, kind of just pumping out, these billion-dollar companies with 1,000 K1s and trying to, it's almost data software manipulation at some point, trying to make everything just
fit.
ticking and tying, to being able to, growing businesses and individuals where I'm able to have, more of an impact and talking with them and, saving $10,000 to $1 billion companies. Oh, cool. You paid for yourself. Versus, hey, that's, that $10,000 to an individual,
Right.
that you've got, that goes a long way. You can see that kind of going towards the family, impacting them.
And that's what I heard the other thing I heard, I'm glad you brought that back up, is the leap from partner and being a kind of not having impact in that. I mean, you had impact because you're an employee of the organization, but it's not that you don't see that impact.
You don't, and you don't feel it as much when you're in the middle of that,
Right. But as a business owner, seeing, and having relationships, going back to the relationships, having these relationships and people calling you. And the other thing that I wanted to bring out is, just for, purpose of the audience, what I thought, I've always worked with CPAs in my financial planning career. And I've always, financial planning is real creative when it comes to investments. And I always thought that the CPA was much more black and white, and they are, but there's a lot of creativity that goes there as well, from knowing the tax law and knowing what applies and knowing what can apply. So the tax planning side, which, having worked with you, and why we personally work with you, is because you do a lot of the tax planning. It's not just like I'm putting a number in a box. I'm thinking through what this client is doing and what other things apply to that. So I really appreciate that creativity. So just for the purposes of the education of the audience, there is some really cool creative things that CPAs do and they're just a big help to businesses. It's like that safety net for business owners is what you just described.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's what you said, you get to do a lot more of that, kind of working with my clientele. And like I said, getting to know their businesses, them personally, and kind of what the goals are. And I think that's why it's more similar to financial planning, and, kind of works well together, and why, and I think, and I don't know if this is more of a recent trend or I've just kind of seen that, is the financial planners like wanting to partner with CPAs to have that cohesion, because it is, it's not just a black and white, it's so situationally dependent. And kind of having more knowledge and
it's in media you always hear about these billionaires that only pay some minimal taxes and this and that, and every time from the other side of that from understanding how that works, I'm like, good for them, because what that means is that they've got a good team around them that have shown them the tax law is the tax law, right? I mean, I'm not talking about manipulating it. I'm talking about using it to apply it to your system. Most people don't do that. Most people just don't have the team around them, and they end up paying, as you know, more than what they should. But having a good team around them allows you as a business owner to making sure that you're using. How many pages of tax law is there? Last I counted, it was
7.
Right.
For the billionaires that
A
don't
million
pay taxes.
It's like 30,000,
gosh,
40,000.
it's a lot, and it keeps getting bigger. And I said that's probably my biggest struggle is every time there's changes in legislation, they're adding new rules. Okay, now this one's obsolete, or is it, in conjunction? Yeah. It's a lot to go through in the tax law.
All that, obviously, as business owners, Leon and I, building, a startup and doing these things, we're spending, 10, 12, 15 hours sometimes a day working on our business, and we need a good support person that deals with all the taxes, because that's not something that we have time for. So there's a huge value add in that team, and I just wanted to impress upon the audience that's why you bring in the team, so that we can focus on our genius and let you focus on your genius. So let's jump into a couple of questions here.
What is your view on college?
Well, I think college is a great thing for, especially people who want to go into like being a doctor, being an architect, like the things that you need that certification for. And otherwise, I think if you want to get a degree in other things, that there are just so many resources out there now that it's not as needed anymore. It's definitely a path that some people can take, but in my opinion, there's way more paths now, and so it's not a must anymore by any means.
We're hearing that often as we go out and talk to our Gen Z interviews, and we talk to parents, and we just kind of see society. So that's this kind of a newer thing. Obviously, this Generation Z is looking at this and saying, do I really need to go down this route? Because and we've talked about this before, where it's, do I need to go and take this slower, longer path to get a degree, to start my own business or do my own thing? And so, yeah, and then the debate's there. Obviously, I think they've got a good point as far as it depends on what you want. What do you think?
Yeah, and this is one that I've kind of thought a lot about recently. I kind of go back and forth because I look at it, it's like, if I didn't go to college, where would I have ended up? Definitely not here. But it's also because, as an accountant, you have legislatively, you have to go to college and get those hours. Obviously there's some, and now I'm working with, a lot of clients who didn't and are just fine. And I kind of see that. It's like, okay, what industry are you going into has a big, that's a huge factor in whether you think it's necessary or not.
Yeah.
But, and it's also, that goes to, it's kind of hard to say that definitively if you don't have that idea at 17, 18 of what you want to do. You kind of just, maybe fall into the family business, and it's not an arena that, necessarily necessitates a college education.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of, I don't know, I guess is the answer from me. But I think the other part of college, was that relationships, and they always, that's what they preach kind of when you get into, it's not what you know, who you know, and a college is a big place, for that, because you're also kind of learning more about yourself, right? You've got a lot more freedom. And so those are the people that you kind of gravitate towards. And so it has been, even if I didn't necessarily learn accounting, have a lot of these connections and the people that, and make, who end up kind of doing their thing, and you can stay connected. And there's just a lot of opportunities through that. It's like, okay, well, how much does the college cost for that?
Right.
Is another layer of it.
Yeah, that's a huge layer, because that's where I think the big question starts happening. Is like, is it worth $100,000 for me to go have that network? And something might be, if I'm going to Harvard and spending $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000 or $500,000, I better come out on the other side with a great network that's going to launch me, right?
Exactly.
So Leon had a idea. We hadn't talked about this in a long time, but what if we had just communities, right? And
I actually brought this up this morning with someone. We were talking to someone, Gen Z person, about their university experience, and they had expressed that the way their course was structured, they had to go and do all these sort of internships for I think it was the last 2 years of their course, and they were saying how valuable the internships were because it gave them like a feeling for what the working world was like, and I sort of just. But they were sort of struggling to say they didn't feel some of their university education was valuable, like the content wasn't that useful. They didn't use it. But like you were saying, those experiences and the people, and, it is a place where for many people, it's the first time you kind of have to adult. You have to start paying bills. You have to cook food for yourself, right? And that kind of comes with a lot of growth. but we had proposed, it was a thought experiment, but it was like, what if I just got some student dorms, right? And you could move into them with a bunch of other people that have all moved in. You can have Greek life and sports and clubs and all that stuff, but there's no classes. Instead, I just have a bunch of 3-month internships lined up for you, one after the other. And the whole thing pays for itself because you get paid for doing the internships. The internships pay for your accommodation.
Yeah.
Right. And then you buy your own food and you've got your own beer money. And that's your university experience. You've still got all the networking. You've still got a lot of the other pieces that are positives. And there's no classes, but it doesn't cost you anything. Like, would you have found yourself as much as, and a lot of the people we talked to say, yeah, actually, that would have been kind of similar to the experience they had.
Or what they walked away that they felt.
Yeah, what they
value.
sort of took from it, right? But you wouldn't have any debt. And the only difference is you don't get a certificate at the end of it. I mean, I could give you a certificate. If
You can make one up.
I can make one, right? There you go. So, yeah, that was.
Get the graphic designer intern.
I mean, like, would you, something that, I thought the point you were talking about university was interesting, but just obviously you have to hire people that have that, as you said, right? Like it would be illegal not to, but as an employer, as a businessman, outside of those roles where you have to hire those people, do you care if someone's going to university? Like if someone's coming to do your IT or someone's coming to do something that obviously isn't a chartered profession, do you care? Would you hire someone without a degree?
Yeah, and maybe I have, because like especially with the IT, I'm not like I just kind of assume. But at that point, you're like, yeah, do you have a company you're doing it? Everything sounds, legit, right? Talking about IT, I'm like,
but it's not like you're like, okay, I need to see your university degree before
give me your
we can work
certificate.
together.
No.
Right.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a fair point, and I mean, I will say also with mine, like I can hire somebody from like a bookkeeper without a college degree, to kind of help out, as long as somebody's like willing to learn, and that's their alley. There's a ton of bookkeepers just started out of high school for mom and pop shops, and they know their way around that. But yeah, I think.
Is it still required? So is there an apprenticeship block at all to get to CPA? Is it still?
So the CPA license, you have to have enough hours there. And now kind of with everything, with the CPA shortage, they're lowering
the hours,
the mandatory hours.
There's
They're trying to,
shortage?
And
like nursing. That's what I was trying to say earlier.
It's been crazy. And that's why it's like.
It's overworked. And
well, it's funny because when my wife and I started, we're like, researching how to, these other firms market. And we start talking to a lot of different CPAs, and they're like, no, we don't market. It's all referral based. And it's just, we've got more than we can handle. And her with her marketing background's like, whatever, we're going to you're going to get so much marketing, I'm sales background. We're going to market you, and it's going to, and I've kind of fell into that. It's like, oh, okay, I guess that's just, there's so much coming at you. And obviously some CPA firms are marketing.
Sure.
But there's so much more business. And as, they're retiring, there's not as much up and coming. So there is a CPA shortage. And
that makes a lot of sense
people
now.
Yeah.
My CPA is of retirement age. He was actually on the first board of advisors for QuickBooks and helped advise them. And he used to work for the IRS. So I'm like, oh, I love him because he knows all the rules. He knows everything. And he's genius. He was asked by QuickBooks right when they were founded to be on the board of advisors. But I also feel like he should be retiring and like spending time with his grandkids, and he's always available to help me. So it makes sense that he's still working.
CPAs are just working until they retire because the demand is there.
Yeah.
And then, but yeah, that's what's kind of troubling is I've seen a lot of just people who's like, yeah, my CPA retired. And I'm like, okay, well, did they not sell the book? Or they just kind of rode off into the sunset? So that's something, I'm going to start looking into.
Did they not sell the book?
The business.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, because you build this as business of clients and you bring another CPA, sell it to them, and they continue the business.
So somebody like me comes up, he's like, oh, hey, are you going to retire? Maybe I can buy your firm and you kind of stay on for a year or two. That's your exit strategy. And
Sure.
then we make that introduction. And now, you know,
And
2
then
years
hands the
later,
business
I'm your,
off, yeah.
yeah,
I know.
I'm
Okay,
your
I'll
new
introduce
CPA.
you to my CPA.
I know an individual that, and I was blown away by it, that had this $1 million plus practice, and he just got burnt out and said, "I'm not doing it." And he didn't even sell it. He just like gave it away. He's like,
Well, and
called
I get some clients, my CPA just disappeared.
exactly, yeah. And it was just
Wow.
one day. He's like, his website was just gone. So I'm not going to do this anymore. I was like, okay, it's, you know, teach
It
their
also
own. Teach
worried me
their
a
own.
little bit about the industry. I'm like, is this what's going to
Well, why
happen to
couldn't you
me?
have-
Like, you
Yeah.
know, 10 years? I'm just like,
All right, let's jump into another question.
How do you handle doubt?
I'm a very numbers-oriented person in a way. I'm straightforward, practical. If I have a doubt about something, I'm going to do that thing. And I mean, for a lot of like practical physical things, that works really well. But then you start to get into the more, non-physical stuff where it's like, how do you know if like you're doubting a friendship? Like you're doubting
Yeah.
does this person actually want to be friends with me, or do they just want to talk to me because they know I did well in the last exam, right?
Yeah.
And that sort of doubt is definitely like, I'm not quite sure what to do with it yet. I kind of just let it
Yeah.
sit there and say, it's not too important.
Yeah, I guess it's also about trusting your gut.
That's really fascinating. I love these interviews just because you get to like really see what is bugging somebody.
Mhm.
And so
it's such a window,
It
yeah.
is.
and to him it's like, if I've got doubt about something physical and I'm assuming it's good at numbers and math and everything, if I've got doubt, I'll just go do it and I'll figure it out. If it's a known problem and a known solution, I can get it done. But the thing that's not known is the human next to me and what their
What are
intentions
their
are.
intentions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You ever think about that or have any of those concerns, or is that not
He's
something?
never
Yeah.
had a doubt. He only
Yeah.
succeeds.
success, the only option. No, I mean, I think, and this is like even going back to kind of going off and starting the firm, there's always that doubt. And it's easy. And I think it's kind of more common now. It's like the imposter syndrome is kind of popping up, like that phrase, and it kind of can resonate because there's a lot of things like as you're going, and especially like we talk about the tax law having, you know, it's so large. It's like, you know, sometimes you get into these situations like, okay, you just have to grind it out. But that's also, you know, part of that is what I think kind of drives me to being a good CPA is just like, there's that doubt and I need to kind of flush it out. And so research, put a little bit extra time and effort,
Right.
you know, into some of those things to kind of relieve that sense of doubt, you know, as best you can.
Right.
Um,
And when you were saying that, it reminds me of like whenever I was interviewing CPAs, right? Our next one, and Jeremy's ours now, but it was referral based. It was a friend of mine that I really trust, said, this is my CPA. You need to go talk to him, because these are trusted relationships. Because you know, imposter syndrome. We've talked about this before. Everybody has it, and you got to fake it till you make it until at some point. However, whenever you're seeking out professional help because you need to worry about your genius and what you're doing in your company, and you want to hire someone that can handle the complexities of your business, you don't want someone that's just you want somebody that knows what they're doing, right?
Mhm.
And understandable. It's always growing. You're always learning and all that kind of stuff. But someone that is it's that trust that he talks about is really important. Is this person? I've had these experiences in the professional setting with reminds me of an attorney that I previously dealt with, where really sounded great and knew their stuff, but then over time and working with them, it was more of a sales pitch to me. Like the things that I felt like my clients were being sold things that they weren't needed, and that left a bad taste in my mouth. So
Mhm.
it is like, regardless of whether you're in college trying to figure out, is the guy next to me just friends because I did really well in this grade, and he's trying to, get ahead with my knowledge, or whether you're in business and you're trying to refer clients or other things, you want to be able to trust that circle, right? So do you run into that? Like that's just, or is that you're like, I'm too busy doing taxes, man. I don't even.
Yeah. All I do is tax.
No matter what.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have that circle, and I guess how's that? Are we circling around to doubt on that, or
Well, the trust, right? Because
trust? Yeah,
he what he said at the end was, I am when it comes to doubt on certain things that there's a physical answer I can dive into and get it figured out. Like what you're saying, if there's a doubt of my knowledge, I can go figure that out. But where he was having more trouble was, I don't know. It's a other human that, like, if there's another human
Those
in my
pesky
circle,
things.
yeah. Is this person? What are their intentions? And that's the doubt that he was struggling with the most. So that's where I was
yeah,
kind of relating it back to, even as a professional, you have to, like, the people you bring in your circle, you have to really kind of filter that. Like, so that's something that you're gonna. It doesn't go away in college. You gotta continue to work on that.
Well, especially as a business owner, you start getting all of the emails, solicitations, and you do have to sift through. It's like, okay, because you have to build that team,
Right.
But then it's like, is that team, do they really, vibe with you, and this is a good working relationship, or do they just need, numbers, enough, referral people to have somebody referring them numbers? It's like, okay, yeah, we're on your team, but am I one of, 30
Right.
CPA firms that's on your team that you're collecting referrals from? Yeah, so that always creeps in, and you have to just really trust your gut. But yeah, there always is that doubt, and you have to reevaluate it all the time, because it's, some of these, they come in with great intentions, but then 5 years down the road, is it everything's still in line?
Yeah.
So that's something you always are kind of.
I like to trust your gut, because that is what I would say is a mentor to someone like him. It's like you do have to. The gut is a real thing. Like having and I'm not just saying the gut,
The
that you eat,
microbiome.
exactly, microbiome, but your how you feel about another individual, how you connect, and you can have experiences where you immediately connect with someone, and even when you immediately connect, there's still that question you have to. It's like a honeymoon phase. You still have to go through all that, and then it kind of turns into something great, or it doesn't, and but that's typically, early on you can start seeing some of those signs. So I know that even, and that's not only partners, but even when you're hiring someone, right? So I recently hired someone that I thought, my gut says this is the person and she's really good, but it didn't work out, and it is what it is. But within 3 weeks we figured that out, and you move on. And so anyway, that's my thought. Any comments on you guys? I feel like I've done more of the talking this time. You guys have to
Well, one thing I'm working on is not immediately, this is a little bit on the other side, not immediately assuming that person has bad intentions and trying to give somebody the benefit of the doubt. So, but what that calls for is me to have self-awareness and do my inner peace check and try to understand. It is follow your gut. It goes back to that. But not everybody is out to get you.
Right.
So I have to be careful about that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I was recently talking to a person that's going to come on our podcast in the next month, and she's in mental health, and says that in society now we've like these dating apps that you just swipe right, swipe left. Everything is so like quick to like disconnect.
That's so true.
And it is just this mental difference, that mental change in human behavior has happened over the last 10 years, where we can just, you block someone or just cut them off, and you're not having these conversations. You're not trying to work things out. And so that's interesting that you say that there's these assumptions that one shows up to the table. And in the own mentoring that I do for others, those are some of the things that I have conversations about, just like make sure, because I do see that a lot. It's like, wait, if you handle it this other way, maybe you allow the other person to grow by having a
Right.
conversation versus just like, I don't want to deal with it anymore.
But to further add to that, I am also working on taking somebody's word at face value. Like if they tell me something, not questioning it or like, do you really mean that? You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like
Yeah.
sometimes they people mean what they say. Just listen and trust.
Yeah, for sure. Thoughts, Dr. Rocket?
I'm a
Leon?
rocket scientist, not a people scientist, Dan. Yeah, sort of playing off a bit of what you were saying and coming back to your story. In my experience of things, people are rarely that deliberate about anything.
Right, and calculated.
So, and you have these nagging things. Well, what if they're just trying to get something out of me? Or what if they're like very rarely do I go, oh, I need to talk to that person because I want this from very specific
Right.
thing. And as we've talked about, more often, people are nice enough that if you walk up to them, you're like, hey, actually, I'd love to try and sell some products that I think would help your customers. Do you like, here they are. What do you think? Right? If you think they're good products, you'll say yes.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're like, that makes sense. I bring more value to my customers. You make some money, right? So it's like, if I do deliberately want thing, I normally just ask for it.
Right,
Like, do
directly.
you care about this?
Yeah.
Is this good? Because you'll figure it out in the end anyway. And if I do it as some kind of bait and switch, you won't like me.
Yeah.
Or someone's just approaching you because they're like, hey, what do you do? What's your thing? Or, hey, let's grab coffee. You're like, okay. And so that, there are those little voices in your head that like, well, maybe it's this, maybe this. And honestly, like you say, most people just have there isn't some master plan
Right,
in the
right.
universe. But,
Right.
they aren't some Machiavellian genius. They just genuinely just want to get coffee because they think maybe there's an opportunity there. So if they just talk to you, maybe
Right.
something works.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it is tough sometimes. You have to sort of quiet your own doubts, whatever it is, right? The things like you were saying, there's always some niggly voice, it's going to go wrong, you're going to fail. And it's like, okay, well, probably fail quite a lot, honestly. But if like you say, if you just try to take people at face value and try to just be like, hey, even if it screws up, I guess, have a plan B, have a backup, have a way that you can fail safely.
Yeah.
So and fail anyway. And who knows, so that's kind of where I'm at. And I feel for Trevor, because, we all have that little voice or imposter syndrome or whatever it is. What if this person's only friends with me for my grades or my whatever, my good looks or my money or my client, whatever. But most people just are as confused and lost as you are, really. There's no one has these magic answers. We're all just trying to get by and mostly help each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just been my lived experience so far. But and yeah.
I love that. And on that note, we'll end this episode.
Oh, boom.
Wow.
Boom.
Look at that. Awesome.
Thanks, Jeremy. And that concludes episode 11 of Uncharted Your Sidekick for Life. Huge thanks to Jeremy Sweet for sharing his journey from his uncertainties of college to the bold leap of starting his own CPA firm. His experiences remind us that the path to success is rarely a straight line, and sometimes the most valuable lessons come from taking risks with all the unexpected twists and turns that come along the way. If you would like to participate as a Gen Z guest or mentor, visit our site at foundingup.com or check out the show notes. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for joining the Founding Up and Uncharted teams. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with your friends. Until next time, keep exploring the uncharted.